Welcome to Patscast. I'm Brad Whitaker. As we learned from the Super Bowl this year, in order to win a Super Bowl in the NFL, get your team back to the promised land, it really takes an elite top tier quarterback. And I'm not just talking about a top 10 NFL level quarterback. I'm not even talking about top 5. You need arguably the best, maybe second or third best quarterback in the NFL to guarantee that you really have a shot at getting back there. And we saw this for 2 decades with Tom Brady. Obviously, 6 Super Bowl championships in New England, a 7th with the Bucs, had 9 Super Bowl appearances with the Patriots. And we saw in this past Super Bowl that, the San Francisco 49ers had a great team. They were the favorites heading into the game. They had a lot more weapons, a much more built out roster than the Kansas City Chiefs had. But when it came down to the end, when push comes to shove, there was one player who ultimately made the difference and delivered the Chiefs the Lombardi Trophy, and that was Patrick Mahomes. And when you look at this year's NFL draft, there are essentially 3 potential top-tier elite quarterbacks who could be in that conversation in a few years for one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Now, we've seen this in years past. It really is a crapshoot going in. You never know who's ultimately going to be the guy to succeed. It could be Drake May. It could be Jaden Daniels. But it could be Caleb Williams. And the betting odds right now are that quarterback, if there's one of them that is going to be a top 1, 2, or 3 NFL level quarterback, it's probably Caleb Williams. Now, if you look at the Caleb Williams prototype comparison, the guy he compares to the most is Patrick Mahomes. And he can do a lot of the things Mahomes does. Kind of improvise, move around with his feet in the pocket, be mobile but not be overly reliant on it, has the arm strength, has the quick release, is able to make all the right decisions. Certainly there are issues with Caleb Williams, and I'll get to that in a minute. But when you're looking at the prototype comparison, at the high level, he is Patrick Mahomes. And at the low level, he's probably Dak Prescott. And I know none of us are going to get really excited about bringing Dak Prescott to the New England Patriots. But if that's your floor, potentially, that is significantly better than what they've had since Tom Brady left. And if the ceiling is Patrick Mahomes, well, as we're learning right now, the sky really is the limit. Now, if the Patriots do not feel warm about drafting a Jaden Daniels or a Drake May, but they do feel warm about Caleb Williams, and they don't want to wait for a Michael Penix or a Bo Nix or a J.J. McCarthy, as I've suggested, who I think would be a really great developmental piece. Or they don't want to get a free agent like Kirk Cousins, or bring in a bridge guy like Joe Flacco, Jacoby Brissett, or kind of settle for mediocrity, kind of good level quarterback like Baker Mayfield, and they really like Caleb Williams. Well, that's going to cost them. But considering they had the number 3rd overall pick and the Chicago Bears are just 2 spots up at number 1, there are rumors out there, right, that Caleb Williams does not want to play in Chicago. Now, does he want to play in New England? I don't know, but that rumor's been floated out there. Now, I know some reps from Caleb have kind of dismissed it a little bit, but Chicago Bears are in a bit of a quandary here because they do have a great piece in Justin Fields, who really improved quite a bit heading into the second half of this past NFL season. The Bears won 4 out of their last 6 football games, and had they pieced it together early in the season the way they did late in the season, they probably could have been a playoff team, especially competing in that NFC North. And, they have something to build on there with Justin Fields. And if they can acquire a little bit of additional draft capital, there really is an argument to keeping Fields, certainly adding his 5th-year player option, and maybe extending his contract even more. And even if they do plan to deal Fields, they probably will add that 5th-year option at around $25 million, because then a team trading for them, like hypothetically the Patriots, like I floated out on yesterday's podcast, At least know they have him for a couple of years, and even at $25 million, that's fairly cheap for an NFL quarterback, and you can restructure in a variety of ways, so the cap hit isn't as bad down the road. But let's say the Bears do want to keep Justin Fields. Well, if they want to trade that number 1 overall pick, which I would suggest they do, if they want to keep Fields, it's going to require a lot of draft capital or talent, which the Patriots really don't have the latter. But they do have draft capital. And Phil Perry on the Next Pats podcast recently floated out what he thinks it would cost the Patriots in order to get that first overall pick. And he lays it out as such. Obviously, the number 3 overall pick, they're moving up from number 3 to number 1. The second round pick for the Patriots, which is the second pick in the second round. That's the way the draft works because of the tiebreaker they have with the Washington Commanders. And then the third round pick of the Patriots, which I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, is the third pick in the third round. It kind of rotates because there is that tiebreaker between 3 teams there. I think the Arizona Cardinals are the next one. So Patriots would essentially have to give up their first 3 rounds of draft picks in order to move up, acquire the number 1 overall pick, and ultimately draft Caleb Williams. Now, if you are getting that Patrick Mahomes level quarterback potentially, and even if you know the floor, which in my opinion is Dak Prescott for Caleb Williams, I mean, there really is an argument for doing that because the potential there is absurdly high and the bust is relatively low. Now, again, there are drawbacks. I'm going to get to that in a minute for Caleb Williams. But if you know you can get a guy who could potentially be a top 3 NFL level quarterback very quickly. I mean, Patrick Mahomes won the MVP his second year in the league, his first year as a Chiefs starter. I'm not sure Caleb Williams is going to do that as a rookie, but he probably, would start right away. I think it's worth it, right? Now, it's tough because Patriots are essentially starting their offense from scratch, and they need a tackle. Ideally, they re-sign Michael Onwenu, which I think will be their number one priority heading into free agency. But even if you do that, you don't know if Onwenu is going to stick to right tackle where he played the second half of the season, or you're going to kick him back to right guard. You're still going to need another tackle, and this is a tackle-heavy draft, potentially 7, 8, or 9 tackles going in the first round. Really, there's about 10, 11, 12 really solid NFL day 1 ready starters at the tackle position you could take between the first and second rounds. Suddenly, you're not going to have that opportunity anymore, and you're going to draft a tackle later who probably you have to develop for a year. So that makes it a little challenging. So in order for the Patriots to really pull something like this off, to feel comfortable trading their first, second, and third round picks to just move up 2 spots so they could draft Caleb Williams, they're going to need to have a big free agency, right? So biggest priorities, bringing back Michael Onwenu, getting a left tackle that you know is reliable. The guy I've floated out is Tyron Smith from the Dallas Cowboys. You can probably sign him. He's a little up there in age, but for a cheaper contract because he is older, but he is reliable. He is competent, and you can probably get him for a year or 2 contract. It's going to be a short-term thing with a guy like that, but you could plug him in on left tackle on day 1 and feel very good about it. You have Michael Onwenu at right tackle, and you got City So hopefully develops a little bit more, played a lot better toward the second half of the season. Cole Strange at left guard, So at right guard, David Andrews ideally coming back, playing the center position. There's the other Andrews guy who I think looks pretty good that would also fill in at center if David Andrews does indeed retire. But you're spending a lot of money there in free agency, and you're also going to have to spend a lot of other money on ideally a potential number 1 receiver because you don't want to bring in Caleb Williams and put him in the same situation that Mac Jones has dealt with over the last couple of seasons. Yes, he can do more with less because of his mobility, his athleticism, his ability to improvise that Mac Jones certainly does not have, but you still don't want to put him in that position, right? It's like, all right, you got Demario Douglas. You got a pretty good NFL-level slot receiver who's also like 5'8", 5'7". I don't know how tall he is. Not a big guy, needs to put on some weight, but that's about it, right? Kendrick Bourne wants to come back. I hope Patriots can get him. I think they can get him for cheap coming off of an injury. I hope they try to franchise tag Hunter Henry because tight ends are cheaper since there are only about 3 or 4 really solid, highly paid NFL tight ends. So it kind of evens out when you get to the other tight ends in the league. So you could franchise tag Hunter Henry at not too high of a price tag. But you're going to have to go after a T. Higgins, a Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley, or a Michael Pittman Jr. And if you do that, well, my dog there. Then, now you got a good receiving core, right? Let's say you get one of those 4 guys, guarantee number 1. You bring back Kendrick Bourne, you bring back Hunter Henry, and you have Demario Douglas at the slot. Then you have a real receiving core for a guy like Caleb Williams to work with. But you're going to have to strike on all these free agent signings, right? Like, you can't miss on any of them. You can't not address the 2 tackle positions or even 3 tackle positions, right? If you're going to bring Owenu back and plan to kick him to right guard. You can't miss on not addressing the number 1 spot at wide receiver. And you can't miss on a tight end. Patriots don't have a tight end right now, right? Gesicki, Pharaoh Brown, Hunter Henry, all these guys I believe are gone. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments if Pharaoh Brown's still there or Gesicki. I don't think they are. Like, ideally you bring all 3 of those guys back, right? Like, that was one of their bigger strengths. Pharaoh Brown was a pleasant surprise this past season. But you need to rebuild this offense from scratch, and you can do a lot of that by bringing some of the guys back that worked last season, even though there weren't many. But you bring some of those guys back, you're in a good spot, right? But you got to address the left tackle spot. You got to address the primary number 1 wide receiver spot. Even if it is just Calvin Ridley, that's going to be a tremendous upgrade from what we've seen in the last few years. Really miss having Jacoby Myers out there, right? That was a bonehead decision. I mean, I guess you have Juju, you have Devontae Parker, but those guys can't stay healthy. They're getting older. They're not very reliable. Parker can't separate. Juju can't really separate. So you're going to need a guy, in addition to Demario Douglas, who is going to be able to create separation, who's going to be a real vertical threat and has the speed that we were kind of hoping Tyquan Thornton would be. He's still around, but I don't know. There's a lot you need to address. And if you are trading your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round picks for Caleb Williams, then you have a lot less room to move and navigate the draft and bring in some of those pieces and those weapons in the receiving core that are going to help Caleb Williams thrive on day 1. So if you're going to make this trade, you have to have a really great free agency, which we have not seen in New England for quite some time. Hopefully Elliott Wolf, as kind of the de facto GM, is able to do something like that. He's brought in a lot of people he's worked with in the past that I think are going to address those concerns. And look, most of the defense is coming back, but you still have Kyle Duggar and Josh Uche. You're still going to have to deal with the J.C. Jackson situation. I'm guessing he gets cut. Maybe you still bring him back for less. But ideally, there's other guys you can cut, like Adrian Phillips and such, and bring that cap space from $70 million up to almost $100 million. And you got room to navigate there and really fill out the roster. But you're also going to maybe want to bring in a few pieces on defense. Very few. Most of the needs are offense. You're still, if you bring everyone back, which pretty much everyone's coming back, but you bring back Uche and Kyle Duggar, and then you got an elite, probably top 5 NFL level defense. Now, this is just what Phil Perry floated out, right? The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round picks, the Patriots would have to trade those in order to move up 2 spots to get Caleb Williams, which, if he's going to be a very strong NFL quarterback, which certainly he has the tools to be, is worth it in my opinion. Now, maybe there's different ways you could slice it. Maybe you're able to keep that 2nd round pick and you trade next year's 1st round pick, and then you're able to address the tackle position with whomever is best available at the 2nd pick in the 2nd round. A lot of different ways to slice it. But if you think Caleb Williams is that guy, probably worth it in my opinion. Now, there are a lot of concerns. He is a bit aloof. Obviously, ran into the stands and cried to his mama after a loss this season. Not a great look. Very into his personal brand, which hasn't exactly been the Patriot way, even when Tom Brady kind of started to unveil his TB12 program, his business. That rubbed Bill Belichick the wrong way. But things are a little bit different now in New England with Gerard Mayo, certainly known as a player's coach. They're bringing in Alex Van Pelt as the offensive coordinator. All the players and coaches that have worked with him in the past love the guy. So I don't think the character concerns with Caleb Williams are as big of a red flag as a lot of other people are floating out there. But it is something you're still going to have to look into heading into the scouting toward the NFL draft. It's a hard situation, right? And the Patriots, there really is an argument to even trade back from number 3 and acquire as much draft capital as possible, just because they have so many positions to fill, and you're able to draft. Maybe you can get 2 first-round picks if you trade back, and use that on filling out tackle, getting one of the 3rd or 4th best receivers heading into the draft. And you're able to get those guys a lot cheaper than if you're going to address those positions in free agency. But they have a lot of cap space. So I think ultimately, if they do want to go after Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears are willing to do it, you have to nail free agency. And if you do, then maybe you can afford to give up a 2nd and 3rd round pick or a future 1st round pick and move up and take the guy who is considered to be the best quarterback prospect to come into the NFL in quite some time. So I really like Caleb Williams. Again, he looks like Patrick Mahomes out there. I think that's his ceiling, and I think his floor is Dak Prescott. That's pretty damn good. You're not going to get an NFL-level quarterback who, at their worst, is probably Dak Prescott. Now, he does fumble the ball a lot, so that's something he has to work on. Certainly, the turnovers were an issue with Mac Jones last year. I don't think he's going to be as much of a interception head case as Mac Jones, but he did have quite a few interceptions as well in big games this past college season. So some concerns there. Let me know what you think in the comments, though. If you're watching on YouTube, like this video, subscribe, and please comment. Do you think this type of trade for Caleb Williams would be worth it? Do you even like Caleb Williams? Do you think Drake May or Jaden Daniels is better? Are you eyeing somebody else later in the draft? I really like J.J. McCarthy, but maybe you can trade back or trade back into the later of the 1st round and get a McCarthy, a Michael Penix Jr., a Bo Nix. Maybe you like Spencer Rattler. I don't know. But please float it out. I'm curious to hear from you. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, be sure to subscribe there as well. And we'll see you next week.